Deputy Moynihan.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and to welcome our guest before you this morning, or this morning. Going through the statement, I'm nearly going to apologise for bringing it to even attempt to suggest that there would be a bias within RT, and you're taking umbrage to it, I think. But I do think that there is issues that we have to tease out here. I suppose, first of all, I think I would ask you to expand on the process that you have in each of the. By and large, I think the public have bought into the trust and the news aspect of RT going back over the generations, and they have accepted that. There are issues. I certainly would have issues in relation to the current affairs side of it, and some of the, as I would perceive it, the bias that's there, or maybe the groupthink that's within the organisation that comes across. I mean, there are a couple of fundamental issues that I would have with it. And I think that we need to tease them out. What I'd like to know is that the entire process that you have in relation to each and every one of the current affairs programmes, and what process is taken from the idea set up that you're going to have a programme on a specific issue, and how we develop that, and how we look at it in terms of who are the political people that have been brought on. And we've done research in our own political party going back to the period 2010, the 6 months before the election in 2011, and it was quite clearly every current affairs programme there was a minister of that government on, and there was 3 or 4 of the opposition. And for the immediate 6 months after that election, there was a government minister on, and constantly your organisation told us that there would be only 1 member of the opposition on. Obviously, the opposition was more fractious after the election, but it was not fair. I can't justify it in any other simple way except that there must have been a bias in that period because of the research that we have got, and I'd like to tease that out with you. I'd also like to tease out the new programme that you have, the Clare Burden programme, on Monday night. And you've made a comment there that that it would be, that RT, the notion that there would be a bias within RT suggested by the invitation here is simply not true, because of it would undermine trust. That programme, the Clare Burden programme, there were 6 weeks of that programme without any member of Fianna Fáil being invited onto it. That was without a huge protest by our own people and engagement by our own people in it. And I have got no explanation, or cannot find any explanation from it, except that there was an agenda there within it. And I find one of the programmes that you did on childcare, and I think that showed up exactly, in my opinion, and I'd like to hear your comments on it. We had an excellent policy document by Robert Troy on childcare, which he has put ferocious work into, and all political parties do ferocious work in other areas. But I just want to take this point on the programme that he did on childcare, and he didn't find this newsworthy or to reflect, because he had gone into the main stakeholders and had sought information from all the main stakeholders, and the document that he had presented was reflective of what the concerns of the people that were involved in childcare, from the parents right through to the workers, and he brought on people that, in my opinion, hadn't as much information on the panel as we had in it, and I think that it clearly showed to me that there was a bias there, and I'd like to address it. Also, what percentage of the current affairs programmes are done outside of the Greater Dublin region? What the news content? He did a very good programme there recently on rural Ireland. It was probably the first one in nearly a generation that went into the real issues in it. And I'd like to know, it's constantly a Dublin agenda. It's constantly, and I think that there's also, I would have to say that I believe that there's a group think in it. And you know, who's going back to the Claire Borden show, which is doing there's great debate on it, but I think that there was bias, and I'm not taking from the program in any way, shape, or form, but I think there was a bias in it. Who is the producer of that program, and have they been involved in producing other political programs or current affair programs in the past? And you know, we might tease through those issues in the first instance, and I might come back to you then on them, if I may, Chairman.
Okay. Okay, I think I might answer some of those and then bring in Dave Nally, who's specifically current affairs is Dave's area. I mean, Dave can talk you through the process on the individual programs and how decisions are made in some detail. On Claire Byrne Live, the producer is Aoife Stokes. She worked on Primetime for considerable period of time. She's doing, in my view, she's doing an extremely good job on that program, and it's made a lot of impact in the first few weeks. Yeah, I was aware that Fianna Fáil hadn't been on for a few weeks, but I think they've been on pretty regularly in the last 2 or 3 weeks. You know, it sort of depends what issues come up on that program. Claire Byrne Live is trying to do current affairs in a slightly different way to Primetime. Some of the programs don't feature any politicians at all. Some of them are much more political focused. I know that the Claire Byrne Live program has had an interview bid in for the Fianna Fáil leader for several weeks, and I think they've agreed that he's going to come on at some point. We're just waiting to be told by Fianna Fáil when. Now, I think that's been for the last 4 or 5 weeks that it's been agreed he's going to come on. I'm not sure what the timing is of Mr. Martin coming on, but that's a matter for Fianna Fáil to agree timing on it. But the invitation's there, and I think they've agreed he's going to come on, so I'm not quite sure what the delay is on that. On the childcare programme, this is a point made to me afterwards about Robert Troy and the work he'd done. I mean, Dave might want to deal with that specifically, but you know, it's a sort of dialogue that is useful for me to have with the parties across the piece. I mean, I wasn't particularly aware myself of the detail of the work that Mr. Troy had done on childcare. It is quite useful going forward that can feed into news and current affairs, and I'm sure people in the party will be more aware of the detailed work that he's actually done on it than, for example, than I was, but that's now fed into me, and it will feed into future discussions about childcare that he's done. And I think it's very useful when we do have TDs or other politicians who have a very specific area that they have been interested in and have acquired that, and we should be aware of it, and it's useful for me from all parties to be aware of areas that people have got a specific area of interest in. As for the percentage of current affairs done outside Dublin, well, you know, this is something that we have discussions all the time about that, and I did think the farming accidents program was a very good program, and it's good to get David McCullough out and actually present from there. There are cost implications when we do it, to be fair, because we have to put an OB unit out. We have the studio sitting at base, and if we don't use it so much, so that is an element. But we're very well aware, and we have had a number of reports on Primetime and on Claire Byrne from around the country. But you're right, this is something we've got to be very conscious of. But the only thing I would say is that, and you might see from the lineup here today, that there are a lot of people at RTE who don't actually come from Dublin and are very good advocates for coverage around the country, as well as our own awareness of it. I might hand over to, I mean, if you've got follow-up questions, I'm happy to take them, but I might hand over to Dave Nally now to deal with some of your other specific points, if that's okay.
And if I could start with an admission, I am from Dublin. I apologise for that. In relation to Claire Byrne Live, it's true that for the first 6 programmes, I think, Fianna Fáil weren't on it. Since then, Barry Cowan has been on about water charges. Eamon O'Queeve was on talking about rural Ireland, I think. If Micheál Martin had accepted the invitation, Fianna Fáil would by now have appeared on the programme more than any other opposition party. So while I do understand the concern when a run of programmes goes by and any party doesn't appear on it, I think it will mislead you if you freeze frame any programme over a 6-week period and judge the figures on that.
Chairman,
these things have to be judged over a long period of time, and if you do judge it over a significant period of time, you'll find that there hasn't been any bias against Fianna Fáil.
To be fair now, it wasn't after we kicking up a song and a dance after the first 6 weeks. That's why there's been a redress in relation to it. That's the only reason that there's been a redress.
That's not the reason. That's not the reason.
The only reason that's all I can accept.
That's not the case. We take seriously the obligation. It's not the most important thing. The most important thing is to get the journalism right and to communicate the issues well to the viewer. But we do accept and take seriously that it's also part of our function to be fair to all of the political parties over time. It's not easy because there are a lot of different considerations going on. But in current affairs, we keep a very close eye on it. If you look at it from the perspective of any one political party, you will always feel aggrieved that you weren't on that particular programme or you weren't on that particular week. But if you stand back and look at it objectively and impartially, as we do, I'm very happy that the share out, and I wouldn't be happy if it wasn't the case, that the share out of appearances on current affair programmes is very fair. We keep tabs on this, and if you look at it over a significant period of time since the start of 2014, looking at the two current affairs programmes that I'm responsible for, Primetime and Claire Byrne Live together, the share out reflects that government would have had close to half, a bit less than half, in fact, of all the appearances. Opposition would have had a bit more than half of all the appearances. Within opposition, Fianna Fáil have had more appearances than any other party, and Sinn Féin have had the second most appearances. And the difference between them is significant but not excessive. And there has been good representation for independents and for the smaller parties too. So I think over time, any fair-minded person would say that that is a reasonable track record. I can accept that on any given programme or in any given month, a party may have a legitimate view that it ought to have been on any particular programme. But I think the fair thing is to look at it over time, if you're talking about bias. And over time, I can assure you, there is no evidence of bias at all in the appearances on RT current affairs programmes.
On the childcare document that our party had, and numerous correspondence were with RT and with the Claire Byrne show prior to its airing that night about the document. So the RT were fully aware of the document that we had that night prior to that programme. Just to make sure that
Frequently have political parties bringing up wanting to be on any particular programme. That's not what determines who appears on the programme. The most important thing for us is to illuminate the issues for the public and to be fair on the issue.
What determines?
I prefer if people had asked maybe general. I know people want to be very specific, and we all from different parties and we have different views. But if we could kind of, I'm speaking to the members now, if we could kind of maybe generalise rather than be specific. But
just add one thing to Deputy Moynihan. I mean, there were discussions after a few weeks between me and Fianna Fáil and various other representations. These are typical of the representations we had along the way. Now, they're very useful, and sometimes they'll highlight things that we haven't been aware of, or that I haven't been aware of, and then I'll go and interrogate them and ask, why the decisions were made and make programme teams aware of it. And this is not peculiar to Fianna Fáil. This is the ongoing discussions I'll have, and often they will raise legitimate concerns which we will respond to. So, those discussions will be had if we think they're legitimate. But as Dave Nally says, current affairs are probably the most punctilious in terms of the records they keep of appearances. I get them, they're coloured graphs as to which political parties, they even keep records of which parts of the country some of the guests come from as well. So they keep very good records, and we can interrogate that ourselves when the parties do come up, as they inevitably do with complaints from time to time.